Your grief isn't a private burden you're supposed to manage quietly. It's a shared weight you were never meant to carry alone. In the West, we learn to grieve behind closed doors, a dark suit, a quiet drive to a funeral home, a stranger who checks a clipboard and asks what time works best. The body disappears almost immediately. Then everyone goes back to their lives, and you're left to carry the rest by yourself. But in Japan, the first week after a death looks nothing like that. Family doesn't step back, they step closer. And if you're watching this, you already know how heavy silence can be. They stay in the room, they wash, they wait, they gather bones with their own hands, in pairs, so no one ever has to do it alone. 7 things happen in that first week. 7 small acts of togetherness that turn grief from something you endure into something you share. And by the time you understand the last one, you may never look at loss the same way again. Before we go further, here's what's coming. Number 5 is something almost no one in the West has ever seen. Family members standing side by side, using chopsticks to gently place their loved one's bones into an urn together. Not one person doing this alone. 2, always 2, working in quiet rhythm. Number 7 might be the most important one on this list. It's a ritual so unfamiliar to Western ears that most people don't even know it exists. But by the time we reach it, you'll understand why every family in Japan builds toward this exact moment. Most people in the West never realize grief can be structured this way, deliberate, shared, almost gentle in its precision. Stay until the end, because number 7 doesn't just close this list, it reframes everything you're about to watch. Number 1. Matsugo no Mizu, the water of the last moment. In most Western households, the instinct after death is to step back, let the professionals take over. A nurse closes the eyes, a funeral home arrives within hours. The body becomes something handled by people who never knew the person at all. It feels respectful, efficient, safe even. But it also means the very last physical act done for someone you loved is performed by a stranger. In Japan, the family does something different. They stay close, and they do it themselves. Using a small cloth or a sprig of cotton tied to a chopstick, each family member takes a turn. Gently, they moisten the lips of the person who has just died. Not to revive them, not for any medical reason at all. It's a final offering of water, given by hand by the people who loved them most. This ritual connects to something the Japanese call kuyo. It means ongoing acts of care for someone who has died, continued even after their breath is gone. Death, in this view, doesn't end the relationship, it simply changes its shape. Most people in the West never realize this kind of tenderness is even possible in those first raw minutes, that grief can begin not with distance, but with touch. This is the part that changes how you see everything else that follows, because if the very first act is done together, by hand, with water and care, it sets the tone for every ritual that comes next. And the next one asks something even harder of the family, not just to touch, but to stay through the entire night. Number 2. Otsuya, the wake. In the West, once the body leaves the home, it rarely comes back. It's transported, prepared, stored somewhere behind closed doors. Viewing hours are scheduled, brief, formal. A single evening, maybe 2, and then it's over. For most of the night, the deceased is alone, kept in a cold room, watched over by no one but the building itself. In Japan, that idea is almost unthinkable. During Otsuya, family and close friends gather in the same room as the deceased and stay through the entire night. Incense burns continuously. Someone keeps a candle lit. The room is never empty, and the person who died is never left in darkness by themselves. This tradition draws from the idea of ma. It means the space between things, the pause that holds meaning rather than emptiness. Here, that pause is filled with presence instead of absence. There's no rush to look away, no hurry to hand the moment over to someone else. Most people in the West never realize how much comfort comes from simply staying, not fixing anything, not saying the perfect words, just being in the room, through the long hours, so no one faces the night alone. And this is the part that changes how you see everything else that follows, because presence, it turns out, can be its own kind of care. But staying with the body is one thing. What happens next asks the family to touch it, to wash it, with their own hands. Number 3, Yukon, the ritual bathing. In the West, this step is almost always outsourced completely. A mortician, someone the family has never met, washes and prepares the body behind a closed door. Families are kept away, gently but firmly, as if this task is too difficult, too clinical, too much to witness. And maybe it would be if it were left to happen alone. In Japan, family members often take part in Yukon directly. Warm water is poured slowly over the body. Hair is washed, skin is cleaned with quiet, careful hands. Sometimes a professional guides the process, but the family isn't pushed aside. They're invited in. This act reflects the idea of omoiari. It means anticipating what someone else needs and offering it before they even have to ask. Here, that care is extended one last time, even though the person can no longer feel it. It isn't outsourced, it isn't hidden. It's one of the final physical acts of love a family gives, done with their own hands instead of a stranger's. Most people in the West never realize how much healing can live inside a task that looks on the surface like it should only bring pain. But here's what nobody talks about. Washing someone you loved isn't just an act of care for them. It's often the moment grief finally becomes real for the people doing the washing. And that reality carries into the next decision, one that, in the West, often falls on a single, exhausted person to make completely alone. Number 4, sharing the weight of decisions. In the West, grief often comes with a hidden job. Someone has to pick the casket, someone has to call the caterer, choose the flowers, decide what the program should say. Usually, that someone is one person, exhausted, overwhelmed, trying to plan a funeral while barely able to form a sentence. It's treated as a personal responsibility, as if grief and logistics are supposed to be handled by the same tired set of hands. In Japan, that weight rarely lands on one person alone. The household moves as a unit. One relative handles calls to the temple, another manages food for visiting guests, someone else prepares the altar, and someone else greets each person who arrives. No single family member is asked to hold everything at once. This reflects the principle of wa. It means harmony, but not the soft, passive kind. It's an active harmony, built by distributing weight so no one person collapses under it. Most people in the West never realize decision-making itself can be a form of grief support, that the kindest thing you can do for someone mourning isn't always comfort. Sometimes it's simply taking a task off their hands before they have to ask. You've been living with this for years, quietly assuming grief has to be a solo project. Japan solved that centuries ago by refusing to let it be one. But what we're about to cover next, most people in the West have never even considered. It happens after the cremation, and it asks two people to do something with their hands that sounds almost impossible to imagine. Number 5, kutsuage, gathering the bones. In the West, cremation is the end of the visible process. The remains come back sealed, contained, already finished, handed over in a box that requires nothing further from the family. There's a kind of relief in that, also a kind of distance. The final physical transformation happens completely out of sight. In Japan, family members take part in this last step directly, and they do it in a very specific way. After cremation, the bones remain on a tray. Two family members approach together, each holding a pair of chopsticks. Working in pairs, they lift a bone between them and place it gently into the urn. Then another pair steps forward, then another. No one does this alone. The ritual is built so that isolation simply isn't possible. This connects to mono no aware. It means the quiet awareness that things don't last, and the strange beauty found precisely because they don't. Here, that fragility becomes something you can hold, briefly, with someone else's hands beside your own. Most people in the West never realize a ritual could be engineered so deliberately against loneliness. Every pair of chopsticks, every shared lift, all of it designed so grief has company, even in its most physical, most final moment. And this is the part that changes how you see everything else on this list. Nothing about Japanese mourning was left to chance. Every step was built, generation after generation, to make sure no one carries the heaviest moments by themselves. There's still one ritual left, and it's the one that quietly ties every single item on this list. Number 6. Feeding the spirit. In the West, once the funeral ends, daily contact with the deceased usually ends too. There might be a headstone to visit, a photo on a shelf, but there's rarely a daily task, something small and physical that connects you to the person you lost, once the service is over and the guests have gone home. Grief tends to go quiet after that, in a way that can feel strangely abrupt. In Japan, the connection continues every single day. At the home altar, family members place fresh rice and water each morning as an offering for the spirit that has just departed. The duty rotates. One day it's a daughter, the next a grandson. The bowl is emptied, washed, and refilled, again and again in the days following the death. This continues the idea of kuyo, the same ongoing care for the dead introduced at the very beginning of this list. It means the relationship doesn't end with the funeral, it simply changes shape, day by day, bowl by bowl. Most people in the West never realize how grounding a small daily task can be. Not a grand gesture, just rice, just water, just showing up again tomorrow, the way you showed up today. You've been living with sudden, silent grief for years, the kind that vanishes the moment the funeral ends. Japan solved that centuries ago with something as simple as a bowl refilled by hand. Save the last ritual for the very end, because once you see it, you'll understand why every single thing on this list led here. Number 7. Shonanoka, the seventh-day gathering. In the West, grief has no fixed checkpoints. There's the funeral, and then there's just time, stretching out with no clear markers. No one tells you when it's okay to feel a little lighter. No one gathers the family again to check in, to ask how everyone is actually doing 1 week later. You're simply expected to keep going, alone, without a single built-in moment to pause. In Japan, the family reunites exactly 1 week after the death for a ceremony called Shonanoka. Relatives return to the altar together. A priest often leads a short service. There's incense, quiet prayer, and afterward, a shared meal. It formally marks the end of the first, hardest week of mourning, and it gives everyone a reason to be in the same room again, on purpose, instead of drifting apart. This reflects Ichigo Ichie. It means treasuring this one gathering, this one moment, because it will never happen in exactly this way again. Every person in that room, on that specific day, is part of something unrepeatable. And this is where everything else on this list comes back into focus. The water offered in the first hour, the night spent watching over the body, the washing, the shared decisions, the chopsticks lifted in pairs, The rice refilled morning after morning. None of it was random. Every single act built toward this one moment when the family sits down together and says, out loud or simply through presence, we made it through the first week, and we made it through it side by side. What they discovered might surprise you. The most important part of grief was never the funeral itself. It was every ordinary, deliberate moment of showing up for each other in between. Look back at everything you just watched. The water offered by trembling hands, the night no one spent alone, the washing, the shared decisions, the chopsticks lifted together, the rice refilled morning after morning, the family gathered again on the seventh day. 7 rituals, 7 completely different acts, but every single one built around the exact same refusal, the refusal to let grief happen in isolation. In the West, we often treat mourning as something private, something to manage quietly, alone, behind a closed door. Japan never accepted that, not once, not for a single one of these 7 days. And if you're watching this, some part of you already knew that grief shouldn't be carried alone. You just needed to see what it looks like when an entire culture agrees. If this gave you even one thing to think about differently, share it with someone who's grieving right now, or someone who once did it entirely by themselves. And subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the quiet wisdom Japan has been living for centuries. Your grief was never meant to be a private burden. You were never meant to carry it alone. In Japan, they never do.